Okay, we're live. Welcome to another Nerd Stalker live podcast. I'm Social Greg, aka Social Greg, Greg Laurie, aka Social Greg on Twitter for the Nerd Stalker Media Network. So today I'm pleased to I'm writing an article called Crowdfunding in a Crowded Space, and I'm going to be looking at different models of, I would say, in the crowdfunding space. We're going to look at equity, specific equity, and then also today I have Josh Lifton from Crowd Supply, who has a really kind of a different model. They don't really call it crowdfunding. It's product development as a product, as a platform, as they call it, and it's curated. So this is another way where you, as a up and coming product developer, could look at instead of going to the traditional Indiegogo and Kickstarter route. And that's why I'm writing this article. I kind of want to inform people of 2016, what are your options if you're developing a product and if you have a viable product. And what I've seen over the last few years with at least Kickstarter is that it's turned into this crowdfunding campaign to I would call it a marketing test vehicle almost now. Almost everyone's going to throw their product on there and they see if it has legs or not. And it's an interesting thing that I've seen develop over the years with Kickstarter and to a certain degree Indiegogo. And so anyway, Josh Lifton, thanks for coming on to Nerd Stalker Live from Portland, Oregon, right?
Portland, Oregon. Sunny Portland, Oregon. Thankfully, it started to rain finally. Yeah.
No, it's beautiful down here in San Francisco today. So, we had a very cold summer, and I know you guys had some pretty beautiful weather over the summer, as it always is in Portland. But today I want to talk to you about is, in May 13th to be exact, the SEC provided these rules about specifically the crowdfunding. And I wanted to ask you, has that affected your business model? Now, maybe before we even start that, you maybe go into what Crowd Supply is really quickly, and then talk about these SEC crowdfunding rules that kind of came on and how it's affected you guys.
Yeah. So Crowd Supply launched in early 2013. We launched as essentially what we are today, which is a platform for launching physical manufactured goods, right? For launching other products. We don't do donations. We don't do charity or arts patronage or anything like that. It's really about getting a manufactured product out to your first backers. And around that, we do the crowdfunding piece, obviously, but then we also sell the product afterward in the form of pre-orders and from our warehouse and stock. We do some marketing help if needed. We can do media asset production. All these things, we do fulfillment, right? We can ship the things for you. But all these other services are around the launch of your new product. And it's important that it's a physical product. It's not software necessarily or anything like that. So from the very beginning, that was our focus, and we've stayed true to that. Of course, we've been thinking about equity crowdfunding, and that's what you're referring to with the SEC rule change. And that's been a long time coming, right? That's been, ever since 2012, I think, is when the Jobs Act was announced. Yeah. It's still getting rolled out, and this was a big year for that. Our stance on it hasn't really changed, right? We think it's something that could be useful to some people, but we don't see it taking off in its current form, at least not for the types of creators that we're working with, right? We absolutely think, you mentioned market validation, or you alluded to market validation. We think that's great, right? And that's the whole point, right? Like, let's take the risk out of how much time we're going to spend on this and how much money we're going to put into it before the product launches, and see if people really want it. Now, I think some people have taken that a little bit too far, right? And they've presented essentially marketing campaigns for things they can't deliver on, and that's something that shouldn't happen, right? And we make sure that doesn't happen on Crowd Supply.
That's an interesting point you said, because I think with a lot of these things, they follow what I call the playbook of
Right.
Kickstarter, right? The Kickstarter playbook is the best I can say. They kind of go, if you look at their site, they kind of walk you through, the A, B's, and C's of it, right? But, it isn't as simple as all that, right? I mean, you still have to understand, you have to build and fulfill at the end of the day. Otherwise, you have a mob.
Potentially a lawsuit, potentially. I mean, there's all sorts of things that as a creator, you wouldn't want to have happen to you. I mean, your reputation is ruined, your backers are unhappy, you might be in legal trouble, etc. So, yeah.
Right. So when you're doing a lot of this this crowdfunding that's going on now, do you hear out there in the government area? I don't know if you monitor it very closely. Maybe you probably do. Is there something on the horizon that maybe, now that they kind of really clearly defined equity, right? Do they see anything on on your side that's starting to, maybe worry you about some of the SEC rules that are starting to come out and play more in this?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be affected as much by the SEC. What I do see and what we're trying to fight against is just these campaigns that get a lot of publicity, a lot of funding, and then fail to deliver, right? They and either, most of the time it's just they were naive, right? They didn't know what they were getting into. Sometimes it appears to be criminal, right? There's actual embezzlement or actual fraud. And there are some governmental agencies that have taken action against that. I think the state of Washington recently went after somebody who did a Kickstarter campaign and didn't deliver their product. I think there are a couple other examples. There was the famous, or infamous, I should say, Canadian group that, his partner built a house with the funds instead of making the 3D printers they were supposed to do. There's all sorts of things like that. And then of course Kickstarter commissioned a journalist to look into what happened to the Xanodrome because that was such a fiasco. That didn't seem to be as criminal or criminal at all, really, but just kind of negligence, right?
Mismanagement, negligence, however you want to call it, and I think what's interesting about your platform, when we last talked, and maybe we could go into some of the things that have changed since we last talked next is the ability to curate adds to the success of the crowdfunding, right? So that's an element that really Indiegogo or Kickstarter does not have, right? Is this curation element that allows you to evaluate the legs of the product, and again, it's very specific in your area. It's hardware, hardware or hard goods based, right?
Manufactured goods, yeah.
Yeah, manufactured goods. So, why don't you kind of also update the audience, kind of what's happened since we last talked. And I know you guys went through, you're a startup like anyone else. You went through some investment last year. Even I think Joey Ito was one of your famous investors. Right?
Yeah, so Joey came on through his private or his fund that he's helping manage. We have Seven Peaks Ventures from Bend, Oregon. We have a couple angels from the Bay Area. We have SOS Ventures from all over the world, really, led by the Portland Seed Fund. We raised just under $1 million, and that allowed us to expand our space and our employees. It's been going great. So it's been over a year ago. Unlike a lot of startups, we had revenue from day one, or month one, I should say, and that's helped tremendously, and we continue along that pace.
I mean, you are very fortunate because your model had a revenue element as soon as you took your first project in, essentially.
It's interesting too, that revenue model is tied critically to the success of our creators, right? Because over half our revenue comes from selling the products afterward, and so we're really highly incentivized to make sure that your product actually gets delivered and that you're prepared to do that.
Right, and in a funny way, it goes back to that old what I would call kind of business development model they had with hard goods in the past. And I mean, they still do, where they have representatives in an area, and they would serve that one area, and they would make sure they would also take the order fulfillment for that company who's probably based usually overseas, to act as their agent in that one area, right? I mean. and again, they're incentivized just like you guys are to make sure the product goes through. Otherwise, they ruin their reputation in that local area, right?
Yeah.
Very simple, right?
I mean, one interesting thing that's happened since we last spoke is that our focus has even narrowed further, not just to physical products. We do physical products, but most of the products we're seeing now are what we'd call open hardware, which is a kind of a loose term. But they're products that are in some way, or hopefully many ways, open for inspection, transparent in their use, and transparent in how they were made, freely modifiable and hackable by the people who buy them. So it's kind of the extension of open source software, but to hardware. And there's just such a demand for that. People want laptops that they can trust. They want, they want cell phones that aren't completely tied down, right? They want workstations that, all these things. Yeah, the Novena laptop is a good example. That's a completely open laptop, as open as it can be, and people gobble it up. It's not a replacement for a MacBook Pro, but it is absolutely something that a lot of electrical engineers and hackers want to play with.
Yeah, and what I like about what you guys do is you're almost kind of like carrying the flag for the indie developers.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a cool company in that way. I always kind of gravitate towards the indies for some reason because they're the underdogs, right?
Right. For a very good reason. It's not just that they're the underdogs; it's that they are doing things that you can't find anywhere else, right? You're not going to find a Novena at Walmart or Target, right? You're not going to find it at Best Buy. These are things that wouldn't exist otherwise, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the market is small. It means that the market is not, the structure, the infrastructure that creators have is not set up to promote those sorts of products. And you can look at the VC world, on one hand, they demand some return, and they don't see yet that open hardware can have that return. Now, of course, I believe differently. And if you look at open source, right? Today's largest companies, the very foundation of those companies is open source, right? Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft. Whether they abide by those rules or not is a separate thing. But
more and more every day, even Baidu, I think, announced some kind of open source AI thing that is just
and even
incredible.
if they didn't announce it, they're still using, their servers are still running Linux. They're still running, software that is open source. So.
And God, yeah, that's amazing. Let's go talk a little bit about, how a indie developer would actually go through your process. What do you think your rough acceptance rate is? Like, maybe I get, like per 100 or per 10, however you want to call that. I like to hear exactly, because it's curated. So,
Yeah. So there's two sides of curation, right? There's the, first of all, there's the outright rejection. This is not going to work. It's not even for something. It's not even manufactured, right? Or you're asking for charity or something that we just don't do, right? There's a lot of those that come our way. We say we don't do that. Go look somewhere else. Then there are the group of people that come with an idea that just isn't viable, and we know it up front. We don't need to test it in the market. We've seen enough. We have enough experience, and we've seen these things enough that we can just say, listen, this isn't going to work, right? For whatever, it's not going to work through crowdfunding. You might be interested in doing late night TV ads or something like that, right? And that might actually work.
Right. Go to Shark Tank.
Right. And there's all sorts of things that could work that aren't crowdfunding. And then there's plenty of B2B products that typically doesn't work with crowdfunding. You're selling directly to consumer, right? So overall, I think our acceptance rate is probably less than 10%. We spend a lot of time explaining to people, no, here's why. And we never just say no. We just say, here's why this isn't a good idea. Here's what we suggest you do. If you change these things, maybe you could come back and relaunch it. And some people do.
Wow.
That's great. The small group that we do work with, or the small percentage, I should say, of campaigns that we do work with, it can take anywhere from 3 years to launch. And we've had that. Down to like a couple days, depending on how far they are and how much help they need. So it's a pretty small group, or pretty small percentage of people that we work with. so there's the rejection and explanation why, but then once they get in and we work with them, they get the benefit of all of our expertise. We've launched hundreds of products. We've seen thousands of campaigns, and we're going to tell you our opinion, right? We don't make money unless you do, and so we're going to tell you exactly what we think in no uncertain terms, right? We want your project to succeed.
Wow, yeah, it's interesting because in the article that I'm writing, you guys kind of touch almost every step of the way that I kind of talk about. I'm going to also talk about the PR and marketing angle to crowdfunding, which a lot of these companies are starting to come up. I mean, I'm just amazed how much PR, marketing, crowdfunding focused companies now that are offer either products or their companies as a whole doing that. And almost dangerously, actually, when I read their stuff, almost guaranteeing a win. I mean, and dangerously, like I said, is that the ignorant or the people who are not as informed will, obviously get hooked into that and spend money. It's part of that. I haven't talked to you about this, but a lot of reasons why we launched NerdStalker was really similar in your ways that you guys are making a lot more money than we are, is we always felt some of the PR boost is a little bit off-centered for startups. I don't know of too many startups unless they have some big cash out of the gates that could afford the 5 to 10 retaining fees that the PR agencies want. And I love PR agencies because we get a lot of our articles from them. But at the same time, it isn't a sustained thing, right? I mean, you only could do it through a sustained 3-6 month period, and then you're done, really, right?
Yeah, and
now you're on your own again.
And actually, Crowd Supply itself went through that, right? When we launched, we had a professional PR firm, right? And they did a great job doing what they do, right? They got articles and we made connections in some pretty big national and international media, and we very quickly discovered that that's not what we needed, right? What we needed was to pinpoint. We didn't need a blanket, coverage across everyone. And that was good for some reasons, but it was horrible in others, right? Like every person who read that Forbes article or that Inc. magazine article or something decided, let's talk to these guys because I have this idea. I mean, my jump to conclusions matter or whatever it is, right? And they just weren't good fits for us, and so we had to explain that just over and over and over. So what we discovered is that we just have to focus on these. The set of innovators and creators who are good fits, and that's what we've been really successful with since then. And you're right; it took about 3 months to figure that out.
But it's part of the journey of a startup, right? I don't think there's a wrong path, but you learn a lot from the path that was before you, right? Right. And so I think that's what you're just kind of going through is that whole learning curve of trying it. Let's try it this way. If not, we pivot to another way, right? I mean. It's wonderful. Well, anyway, I appreciate you coming on. I'll let you go because I know you're pretty busy looking at products. Thinking that 10 out of 100 if you look at that number. But I mean, what's that?
We have our process down. We've become pretty efficient at that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Yeah, it's probably like if I documented the process of how many times I get pitched by a PR agency for an article, I guess I've had this natural way of actually filtering through something, right? But anyway, why don't you tell everyone how to get in touch with you and get to know Crowd Supply? I know there's a lot of articles out there, but
Yeah, so you can go to crowdsupply.com, of course. We have a whole creator guide that we've set up. This is, again, since we last spoke. And that creator guide goes into detail about what you'd want to start a campaign. Of course, you can look at previous campaigns on the site, look at some stats and things like that. There's plenty of ways to get in touch. Email, there's a web form. We're on social media. So I'd love to chat, find out what people are up to.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, anyway, thanks again, Josh. So that was Josh Lifton of Crowd Supply. Doing product development as a platform, as they call it. So this is Greg Valory, a.k.a. Social Greg on Twitter for the NerdStalker Media Network. We believe in tech startups, design, and you. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and be careful out there. Thanks again, Josh. Appreciate it.
Take care, Greg. Thanks.